Drills. In this chapter dedicated to the drills, we're going to look at most of the exercises that are required for learning the Stalders. One of the first drills to do is one that allows you to work on the specific planche position. In this teaching scenario with the wooden minibar and foam cylinder, we'll start from an aligned position, similar to the descent from the clear hip circle to the handstand, and we're going to work on the opening of the legs and body. The useful thing here is that because the gymnast has the thighs placed on the foam prop, she can focus on her back position. So she'll really be able to feel that when she pushes as much as possible into her shoulders shoulder blades protract sideways, creating this characteristic rounded position, which actually comes from a contraction of the serratus anterior muscles. In this position, she can also determine what visual point of reference she needs to have in order to figure out if her shoulders are positioned correctly or if they're in front of or behind the bar. In addition, when you use a cylindrical prop, you can stimulate the pull of the heels and therefore feel on the one hand that the back is rounded and on the other that there is an opening. These two somewhat opposing movements, which are difficult to perform on the first attempts, are given priority in this exercise, which is both very simple to do and very useful from a kinesthetic perspective. Here's another exercise. This one is a bit more physically challenging. It's useful both for trying to instill the rhythm of the pull of the heels and for learning movements to do in various drills on the close turns that start from a rectangular block and which we'll see in a little while. In this scenario, the gymnast tries to mimic the snap-down timing, that is, an opening followed by a closing and forward curl. This will enable her to lift the legs. Once her body is in an aligned planche parallel to the floor, she will again open the hips by pulling the heels, keeping the upper back rounded. This will therefore enable her to position herself dynamically in the move starting position of the closing movement in order to invert into the Stalder. Here are some more exercises. This is a specific exercise for working on the beginning. In the technical analysis, we saw that it was important to simultaneously push off and close. This scenario will let us practice this. In order to enable the gymnast to get into the starting position with the upper back rounded and the hips open, we've used a wooden base that is around 30 centimeters high and a foam prop that is slightly rounded on top. Here all the gymnast is going to do is push off and close while slightly straddling the legs. It will be very important to emphasize that she needs to do these movements in combination. And during the last phase of the move, it's important to have the gymnast contract the abs and thighs so that she increases the hold in closed position. Now for another exercise. As you can see, I've chosen to first present exercises that are done on the floor and then those that are done on the bar, but depending on your needs, you can easily vary the order. Here we're going to work on the lifting phase. Please note the hand position. You can see that the thumbs are next to the hands. This is very important. The thumbs are never wrapped around the uneven bars. Doing so often causes the arms to rotate inward and to make the elbows bend. From the beginning and in all the drills you do, make sure that the gymnasts position their hands like this with the thumbs next to the palms. In this exercise, we are interested only in practicing pushing off. Ending up in support on the hands against the red block makes it possible to focus on the upper back and the practicing of the final phase of push-off with the arms stretched, keeping in mind that in this movement the legs stay close to the chest. You can then add on to the exercise, having the gymnast get into the handstand with or without spotting. Here you need to stay vigilant on the head position, making sure the arms are over the ears. So when you do this exercise, pay attention to the descent phase. This descent is not an endo descent. When the gymnast gets back into starting position, it's only to do a series repeating the lift into the Stalder. If worst comes to worst, it is important to avoid stressing this in order to prevent the gymnast from thinking that they're doing an endo entrance. This would cause you to lose time later if you wanted to practice this. For an endo, you would aim for instability with the body slightly open from the handstand before opening the legs. In contrast, here the gymnast lowers the legs immediately in straddle position. Now let's look at two short presentations of the progression of this drill. Here we're departing slightly from the context of the Stalder and getting into the Stalder with pirouette. You'll add a small, stiff block about 15 centimeters high behind the bar and keep the red block vertical so the gymnast can make the connection with the preceding exercise. The fact that this small block is slightly raised compared to the bar allows for a minor imbalance in height between the left and the right, and in this way it shifts the center of gravity to above the supporting arm when the gymnast moves through the quarter turn. This is actually the concept of moving into a one-armed handstand. Here is a useful exercise that can be done with or without spotting, and that then makes it possible to add on quarter turn plus quarter turn, and therefore to do a Stalder half turn or pirouette. Here is another way to add on to this exercise, also with the goal to stress the movement through the one-armed handstand in longitudinal rotation. Now let's look at working with the straps. Here's the first exercise. As we saw in the technical analysis, the bar plays an important role in the Stalder and in general in all the close turns. It's crucial that young girls become aware of this rebound off the bar and the fact that it can be used in order to help them do the skill. In the Stalder phase, the gymnasts need to be introduced to the rocking movement, that is, forward and backward swings in pancake position. The goal of this exercise is to get the gymnast to understand what happens when she is moving into a vertical position. It is at this point that the weight of the body is felt most. She needs to feel that the back and balls of the feet are trying to lower toward the floor in order to try, as it were, to manipulate the bar and pull it down. If we draw an analogy with teaching the giant swing backward, it would never occur to us to turn around the bar without learning how to swing. Here it's the same thing. The first time you do these drills, you'll see that they're rather hard and the gymnasts have difficulty creating swing. You'll really need to be patient. To help them, you can add a small weight, like you see here on the feet, of around 500 grams to 1 kilogram. The purpose is not to do physical preparation, but to make it easier to lower the feet and therefore better invert the pelvis. You'll also realize that it's rather rare for gymnasts to grasp this rocking exercise without being spotted for a while. So you'll often need to help, particularly on the backward swing, that is on the endo swing, because they don't really understand what movements to do, and they often confuse the endo lift with a forward or back kip, and they tend to end up in a straddled L. There are other exercises that you can start quickly. You don't need to wait for the gymnasts to master the rocking movement because it does take some time. So for example, in your circuits you can do around 10 minutes of the rocking exercise along with the small exercises like the ones we saw a little while ago on the floor. Then you can move through the progression and go on to the next exercise. Here the gymnast starts from a standing position facing the bar. With the magic of video editing, I'm rotating the image to the left so you understand what we're looking for in this exercise. Ultimately, the gymnast reaches the planche. You'll have the gymnast jump and create this opening in order to, on the whole, get into the Stalder starting position. So obviously, if we compare this to the planche from the handstand, we can say that the shoulders are a bit too far in front of the bar. What we're looking for is a true 90-degree angle between the arms and the back, and this dynamic opening. This is really an exercise of feeling, of becoming aware, and then we'll add on. The gymnast will put her feet on the bar, initially with the legs squeezed between the arms, simply to work on the concept of closing and lengthening at the same time. Because the gymnast is in a starting position at bar height, from the end of the jump she can already be in the process of descending, so this will really promote the concept of lengthening while descending. There's less risk that gymnasts will close the shoulders when they practice like this. Then we'll add on with a slight straddle. This is to make it possible to practice the feeling of closing with the legs squeezed initially, then with them straddled at the last minute. Now we'll add on to the exercise and take off from an impulse provider. The focus is to stand in starting position facing the bar, but taking off from a little higher and using the rebound. This gives the gymnast an additional swing for the Stalder. To start, we'll work on a sole circle with the legs piked, then straddled. And gradually in this scenario, we'll start working on opening the legs. First of all, work on opening them in the Stalder, in one swing direction. That is, for example, the gymnast does a sole circle with legs straddled in the forward swing, and a Stalder beginning in the backward swing and inversion. When you work on the beginning in the sense of the endo, you're working on the concept of the inverted pelvis with the back rounded, and because the gymnast starts from the mini high bar, she is able to have the buttocks positioned correctly and not pointed downward. When you work in the sense of the Stalder from the placement of the feet on the bar, this reinforces the fact that it is the backward movement of the feet that enables the gymnast to invert. It's likely that you'll also need to spot it first in the various beginnings in order to help the gymnast understand the movements she needs to do. Then we'll progress by starting the Stalder right after the jump from the impulse provider in opening position, and gradually the gymnast will be able to turn around the bar. Don't hesitate to help by spotting from time to time in order to get through the various stages. Placing the feet on the bar at the end of each turn allows the gymnast to work on pushing off without help from the opening of the legs and body in order to lift. Then the same thing without placing the feet on the bar. This is a little harder for the gymnast, but this will make her push off while turning the wrists in order to support herself in the lifting phase. Once the gymnast manages to turn around the bar, you'll try to get her to rock more. Have her start from a standing position and swing from front to back until she can get around the bar and ultimately lift into the Stalder. Now for an exercise that focuses more on the beginning of the Stalder. You'll actually find that the fact that the gymnast can get around the bar doesn't necessarily mean that she can do the Stalder, because one of the hardest steps to work on is the beginning from the open planche. So this exercise with the rectangular prop positioned about 20 centimeters below the bar is really an exercise that will allow you to break this step down. You'll start from the exercise that we did on the floor a little while ago on the timing of the snap down, and then you'll gradually progress with the sole circle piked up to the Stalder. The major advantage of this exercise is that it resembles the actual starting position of the Stalder, so it enables the gymnast to perform the combined movements of closing and pushing off while descending. Then, once the gymnasts grasp this exercise, you'll do it from a mini trampoline. The mini trampoline is useful because it allows you to work on series. That is, the gymnast will bounce, turn around the bar, bounce again and start again, and so on. So there's a lot of repetition in a short amount of time. However, the major disadvantage is that the gymnasts lift easily into support, and they often start the phase of lifting into the planche or else into top dead center, that is when the lifting into support is done, and they haven't yet started the descent phase. As a result, they manage to start the Stalder, but the feeling they get at that point is inaccurate compared to reality because they should start in the descent phase. This is why you should teach the gymnast first from the red block and only after that from the mini trampoline. Another small but important point when you work in this scenario is that you should protect the legs of the trampoline with foam, because on the first attempts, when the gymnast doesn't manage to turn around the bar, she lands on the trampoline and her back might hit the frame. Now let's look at a few exercises on the high bar, also with straps. We're going to look at two more ways to work on the rocking movement. From a small swing, you can have your gymnasts do the beginning in front of the bar, then swing and again release. You can do this on the forward swing or the backward swing. These small forward and backward swings in this Stalder position will also reinforce the role of the rocking and the concept of the split under the bar. Here are some more exercises to do on the high or low bar, rocking with moving through the open planche position. This exercise is somewhat difficult and it's done when the gymnast can on the whole do the Stalder. The goal of the exercise is to work on the rhythm of the opening and to reinforce the closing of the legs and body. And one last exercise, the giant swing backward Stalder sequence. This drill is useful for learning how to do a Stalder from an unstable handstand. Very often when gymnasts learn the closed circle, they tend to try to start from a successful handstand. That is, if the handstand isn't completely controlled, they do not hold it well. They tend to stop and not do the closed circle. They're often a little afraid to get the speed to start their Stalder, clear hip circle or sole circle. When you work on closed circles from a giant swing backward like here, the gymnasts learn to control their closed circle when they have speed in the rotation. This ends the segment on drills. Of course, you can also do all of them on the uneven bars. If you'd like to learn more about the various learning exercises that exist, feel free to visit www.gymneo.com to browse through the books dedicated to closed turns. These books offer numerous solutions to help you improve your sessions and enable you to show the gymnasts what you expect from them. See you in the next chapter, where we look at spotting.